Welcome to Lead Today with me, Kalyna. Let's talk leadership. Hello and welcome back. Today we're continuing along the thread of communication in relationships, and we'll be speaking specifically about how to advocate for yourself. I want to start out by reminding you that this is anecdotal, this is not therapy, this is not advice. This is purely educational and comes from my experience as a coach in conversations, the frameworks that I've used, things that I find helpful. Again, not therapy for all you in the back. Have to put that out there. I want to also remind you that there is a free personality assessment. It's called the Enneagram. There's a link in the show notes. Please take it if you want to understand yourself better, the way you interact with the world, if you feel stuck, if you feel you don't know why you are the way you are. Please check it out and take the assessment. You will get your results free, and then there are paid reports if you want more in-depth information. There's a personalized report, and you can also book in a one-on-one conversation with me to discuss your results and strategize how to utilize them to better your life and the way that you approach things. Usually people come in with pain points, right? So the things that aren't working, but where we can go anywhere. All right. As I said, today we are talking self-advocacy, relationships, communication more specifically, and this comes in from someone that watches the show. I'm so excited to get recommendations and requests. I love that. I love hearing from you. So if you have a request for an episode, I could make an episode about something you're requesting. So please feel free to request it. If you're watching the show, why not make a request and have me chat about a challenge you're having. So when it comes to self-advocacy, one thing that this listener mentioned is, okay, so I know how to deal with a tough conversation. I know how to not get defensive, but how do I make sure that I am not a punching bag? So first, there's kind of two things in here. First, how do I make sure I don't become a punching bag? And two, how do I get my opinion across? So I definitely want to start with how do I make sure I don't become a punching bag, because that to me is boundaries. So just because you're not being defensive doesn't mean people can just talk to you any which way, right? And come at you in any way they want. You don't have to get defensive, but you can draw a line. So something like, hey, this conversation is getting elevated, or I see it's escalating. Can we take a break and come back to this? So definitely take a break if things are good. Hey, when you speak to me that way, it's really hard for me to hear you. Can we tone it down? Can we lower the volume? Tone it down might get someone upset if they're elevated, but can we lower the volume? Or you can just simply say, hey, this isn't working for me. I need you to change your tone. Now, for somebody that gets defensive, hopefully that's where you can channel that feeling. If you feel that someone is getting to the point of treating you like a punching bag, then there will be a moment that says enough is enough. The way that you say that is important. Monotone, not raising your voice. Body language, you can even use body language in this instance. You can put your hands up, palms up, facing toward the person, saying, hey, kind of like as if you were making a stop sign. Hey, this isn't working for me. Let's take a breath. Let's pause. I really want to focus on us finding a mutually beneficial solution here. I want us to find a solution. This doesn't seem like the way to get there. I hear that you're upset. At the same time, this is making me uncomfortable, or this is hurting me. This is going too far. I need a break. Anything where you put your hands up, and you can say, hang on a minute. So definitely understanding when enough is enough. There's a difference between, hey, don't get defensive when someone's giving you feedback, and hey, someone's been yelling at you for 10 minutes and you're just taking it. So that's an interesting distinction to make, right? Being defensive doesn't have to mean being a pushover or punching bag. And that's such a 0 to 100 claim in a way, right? like, okay, if I'm not defensive at all, I'm going to turn into a punching bag. And that's why someone who gets defensive, which everybody can get defensive in the right circumstances, right? When you get defensive, it's because you feel that you're being attacked. You feel like you are a punching bag. You know, you do feel like you're the one that's being singled out for being wrong, bad, not good enough, whatever it is. So yeah, if someone comes and says, hey, you know what, this really hurts me, or I'm hurting, and they have their feelings, they can have their feelings. But the moment that they start taking it out on you or making it about you in a sense, right, and you feel like that punching bag, you have every right to put up your hand, right, and kind of say, hey, I hear you. I hear that you're frustrated, or I hear the pain, or I hear the sadness, or I hear, acknowledge, I hear you. And I'm going to need to take a step back. I'm going to need a break, right? And I've had it in conversations where if one person is very high volume, and when I say high volume, I mean they get louder and louder, they enjoy, I shouldn't say enjoy, but they the way that they respond to conflict is they raise their voice and things get escalated. There is another approach, which is low volume, which is someone that retracts, pulls away. Another word for it is a withdrawer versus pursuer, if we're talking about the emotionally focused therapy model. Different words, same concept. Some people get loud, some people get quiet. And if you feel like you're becoming the punching bag and you get quiet and that person's getting louder and louder, you might have to just look them in the eye, get that eye contact going. As I said, maybe create that physical, put the hands up, right, and say, hey, kind of move your hands in motion to get that person kind of out of their trance, because it could be the case that, when somebody gets going and if they're high volume, they're just kind of spinning and you've got to interrupt that somehow. So that, hey, so-and-so, you might want to say their name, right? Hey, Joe, this is escalating. I really want to take a step back. I want us to be on the same team, or I want to be on the same page. I hear that you're hurting. This is going in a direction where I'm having a hard time continuing to listen. And I want to make sure that I'm capturing everything. Now, there's a difference between punching bag, and then the second part of that question was, or get my opinion across, right? So there's one thing, which is draw the line when things are too much for you, and you have every right to do that, and that's not being defensive. Defensive is when you are negating what that person is saying. Defensive is when you are brushing off what they're saying, when you're putting a shield between you and what the person is saying, usually by kind of pointing the finger back at them, So it's like, well, I didn't plan date night, but you didn't plan date night. And you're trying to deflect, but if you can, and so another part of this person's request was, what if there's no truth to what the other person is saying? And that's interesting, right? Because again, when someone's coming at you and they're saying, you didn't do this and you didn't do that, we have to remember the emotions behind the words. We know that it's not really about you not planning the date. I mean, it is, right? To some degree it is. There are going to be complaints when someone is saying, I don't like that you do this, 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 this. The things that they're saying are valid to some degree, unless they're absolutely blatant lies, right? In which case we've got to kind of say, okay, what are they referencing if you think it's a blatant lie? But if you think there's no truth to it, that's a slight form of negating. It's like, no, this person has a feeling, they're frustrated that they don't have date night. Maybe you do plan date night once a month, but they feel like that's not enough, and so they say, you don't plan date night. You see what I mean? It's like, it's a partial truth, sort of, because what they're trying to say is, I want more time with you. And so if you're the person that's doing the critiquing and you're listening to this, and again, one person can be both. You can be defensive and you can be on the critical side. It's not like in a relationship, there's often a dynamic where one person is more often the pursuer and one person is more often in the withdrawn category. But that absolutely doesn't mean that doesn't switch. there can be different contexts, different subjects where you kind of switch roles and one person is pursuing and the other one is withdrawing. It can depend on subject matter. It can depend on where that person's wounds are. So just because you're the pursuer in one situation doesn't make you the bad guy and the withdrawer is not. And we really need to acknowledge that, because withdrawer, you're not some victim, right? I mean, again, barring emotional abuse, physical abuse, any true abuse, which if that's what's occurring in your situation and you think you're being emotionally or physically abused, I want to take this opportunity to please encourage you to reach out for support. That is not what we're talking about here. If there is emotional or physical abuse, I highly recommend you reach out for support to a professional, to an organization, get help. We are not talking about that. This is not about tolerating physical or emotional abuse whatsoever. Okay, so now that's on the table clearly. So you're learning to not be defensive, but now sometimes it feels like if you're not defensive, are they going to take it too far? You have to have a boundary. So there's, okay, I'm not defensive. I'm open to hearing what they have to say. You can draw a boundary if it gets too much. You can also draw a boundary. So draw a boundary if it gets too much. You can also draw a boundary if the way that they're communicating is inappropriate. And what I mean by that, again, is not abuse, but is it inappropriate? You can guide them. And there's a concept called nonviolent communication, another really great tool. You can guide the other person and say, hey, you know what? I'm not able to hear you because I'm just feeling really attacked, and the way that you're talking is making it really hard for me to listen, and I want to hear what you have to say. So if you're getting defensive because you feel like they're attacking you, and they rightfully are, truly just attacking you, to the point of punching bag, you absolutely need to stand up for yourself. So there's one thing if it's getting too much and you just have to shut it down, but there's another when it's like the way that they're formulating what they're saying is just punching at you. And you can say, hey, and this is where there will need to be right? It's not just the words, there's always a tone of voice and a body language component that backs up the words. So if they're coming at you like a punching bag and you've done you don't want to do the pause, stop, but you want to reorient them, you can say, hey, and you might have to raise your voice a little bit, and you might have to, not screaming or yelling, but you're going to have to interrupt, because if they're just coming at you with thing after thing and they've wound themselves up, and you don't want to pause the conversation like I gave you the example earlier, then you're going to have to come in and say, hey, Joe, poor Joe, man, he's getting, Joe's in the ringer. Hey, Joe, and hopefully you get the pause there. You might have to do it again. They might not. They might be so riled up that you have to, Joe, and you, body language, you mean business, right? Body language, you mean business. Again, hands are open, maybe kind of 90-degree angle to your body. You've got the palms out, which signals that you're non-confrontational. If you're showing your palms to the person, you're saying, hey, I'm non-confrontational here. So, hey, Joe, palms up. Joe. And hopefully you can interrupt, right? The name, using someone's name is really useful. Joe. And it's like, okay, what? Right? I'm not a punching bag. And I need you to talk to me differently in order for me to listen and hear what you have to say. Silence is a girl's best friend. Silence is anyone's best friend. State what you need and then create the space. You've just interrupted. Hey, Joe, interruption. Get them to, Joe. You need to get them to, if they're, and just hands up and make sure that they're looking at you and get them to kind of pause. Once they've paused, say, listen. Again, assertive. We're not trying to be rude, but we are trying to assert ourselves here. And not trying, we are asserting ourselves. Hey, Joe, listen. I'm not a punching bag. I can't hear what you're saying when you say it this way, so you've got to adjust your message so that I can actually hear you. I want to hear you, and I hear your frustration, but the way that you're speaking with me right now isn't working for me. So you can have a need. Now, Joe might not like it. Joe might get deflated. Joe might be emotional. Joe might say whatever Joe's going to say. Joe might get even more angry. The reaction of the other person is not on you. Let me repeat that. The action or reaction of the other person is not on you. You control yourself. You remain self-composed. You keep yourself, right? Not defensive. You're clearly stating a need. That's it. You're clearly stating a need. And sometimes, and this is where nonviolent communication, I don't want to say that I'm going against it, but I think tone and being that matter-of-fact assertive, again, you're not yelling, you're not losing it, but you're saying, Joe, this isn't working for me, right? So you can say what you need. With nonviolent communication, the whole piece of taking responsibility for your feelings, we've talked about that in the non-getting defensive, right? If someone says, you're so selfish, and you say, I'm not, you are, that deflection, we've talked about it, right? This isn't that. This is, again, you need to connect to your need. Now, ideally, if I was speaking with a couple or the two people together, we would want the person who has the feeling to also connect to their unmet need, because as we said, all of their anger and frustration is something beneath the surface that has been unfulfilled. So ideally, we would have this person learning alongside you, whoever is in the, again, we can both be in every role, but whoever is in the position of critic, the position of the pursuer, the one that's coming and being critical or attacking, quote unquote, right? That person has an unmet need that they're not communicating clearly, right? And so they're just getting frustrated. Most of us, I mean, how many people are really taught how to deal with frustration? So many people do not know how to deal with that emotion, with anger, with frustration. There's not a healthy way that's taught. They grow up with their parents dealing with anger in a variety of ways, but often it's not necessarily healthy, right? It's yelling, it's slamming doors, it's walking out of the room, it can be a whole variety of responses. And then as a child, if you're the one that gets hurt and you have a temper tantrum, what do most parents do? Send you to your room, right? They put you away. And so no wonder when you're frustrated, if you're somebody that withdraws, you've learned that, hey, if I'm frustrated, I need to be by myself. I need to go away. You're not taught to walk through that emotion with another person. Sometimes you might not even be able to clearly identify where the frustration is coming from. There's not that open discussion of, hey, I'm feeling hurt because I need 1, 2, 3, right? And so the same thing, when Joe is going on and you feel like the punching bag, you either pause the conversation or you say, hey, Joe, I need you to rephrase that so that I can hear it. I'm feeling like you're just laying in on me, and it's really hard for me to hear what you want to say, and I want to hear you. There's another way that you can also, and this is more nonviolent communication, where it's, hey, you know what? When you say that I'm selfish, I feel hurt because I need some recognition of the effort I make to consider your preferences. So I'm going to link to the article that I'm referencing in the show notes. Again, nonviolent communication is a great way. The challenge is that, again, if the other party is very escalated emotionally, you're not going to always be able to come in with a calm tone of voice and say, when I hear you say that, I feel hurt because. But that is the nonviolent communication format. I have found what works, and again, this is personal, this is not advice, but for me, what works when it's in an elevated state is what I told you. The eye contact, the hand, open palm, hey, Joe, we need to pause this, or I'm not okay with the way you're talking to me, or I don't, and so you're not coming at them loudly, you're not coming at them matching their tone or anything, you're slowing it down, you're being very matter of fact. You hear it's like teacher voice. Get on your teacher voice, because that's what, in my opinion, works when someone's escalated. They need to know that you mean business. So it's not aggressive, it's not defensive, it's not escalated loud. It's, Joe, this is not all right. And then the silence, right? So that's to me. But if we're talking nonviolent communication, right? If we're talking NVC, that's the short form I'll use. If we're talking NVC, then it's when I hear you say, whatever it is, I feel hurt because, and you put in your need, because I need recognition, because I need respect, because I need, so when I hear you say that I'm selfish, I feel hurt because I need respect when you're talking to me, because I need validation that you see my efforts, whatever it is. And then you can ask the other person. So if they're coming at you and you're resisting the desire to become defensive, but they're just coming at you, you can ask. Now this, it's tough. It can go either way, but again, this is how nonviolent communication model would say to handle it. You can ask and consider the other person's needs. Are you feeling hurt because you need more consideration for your preferences? Are you feeling hurt? So the other person might say, but I'm not feeling hurt. So you've got to be whatever the person, so you're saying, when I hear you say that I'm selfish, I feel hurt because I need some recognition of the effort that I make. If the other person, if they're just coming at you with, you don't plan date night, you don't whatever, you can come in and consider them. And so use their language though, right? So you never, and this is a concept, and I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm assuming things. When you are talking with someone and they use specific words, in coaching, there's a concept called backtracking. And backtracking is different from paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is when you sort of say what they said, but not with the same words. So it's like, oh, I went to the store and then I saw a movie and then I got a hamburger and I went home. And it's like, oh, so you went out, got dinner and went back to your place. Now it sounds accurate, right? I mean, they went out, they did get dinner, and they went back to their place. But they said the burger, they said the movie, and they said they went home. So if you want to relate to someone, you've got to use the exact same words, because those words mean something to that person, and it's going to relay that you hear exactly what they say. So when you're coming back and considering the other person's needs, and so when they're saying, you don't plan dates and you don't this and you don't care, or you're selfish, or you don't take initiative, right? You want to say, hey, this is where you can backtrack. You can say, hey, I hear that you're frustrated. You can also say, it sounds like, that's a good one. It sounds like you're frustrated because I don't take initiative. Yeah, you don't. You don't plan dates and you don't plan anything. And it's always me. It always has to be me. Okay, I hear you. You feel like it always has to be you to plan things. Yeah, because it is. Because you don't do anything and you don't care. It's like, oh, okay. So, and do you see? It's you don't care. So as they go, and as you feel like you could be getting more and more defensive, but this is how you want to be, detective mode. As you get further down the rabbit hole, it's not really about dinner. It's not really about the date. You don't care. It's like, oh, so you feel like I don't care. Yeah, because you never take initiative and you never this and you never that. Okay. And then you can maybe bring in, are you feeling hurt because you feel I don't care about this relationship, or I don't care about you, right? Whichever one. And they might say, no, that's not, they might negate it. Fine. But they might say, yeah, you know what? I am feeling hurt. I am feeling, it does feel like you don't care. It does feel like you don't put in the initiative, and that makes me feel like you don't care. And so it can go in two ways. We can, no, that's not it. And in that case, you could say, oh, okay, well, what is it? What is it that you feel, right? So we want to go from them being frustrated about a specific example or a specific situation to what their unmet need is. And that's how you can hopefully avoid being the punching bag. But again, if you are getting to the point of punching bag, you take that break, you put the assertive, hand up, teach your voice, and you remove yourself if need be, if it gets that far. And you can be very clear about those boundaries. So you can ask to take a break, but after the break, if you come back and it continues, you can say, Joe, this is not working for me. We're going to have to approach this a different way. I'm happy to hear what your concerns are when you're ready to speak with me in a respectful tone. Boom. Finished, right? Done. And if they keep talking, it's like, I've said what I need to say. I'm happy to talk with you about this when you're ready to speak with me in a respectful tone. I want to hear what you have to say. I can't hear you when you're talking to me like this. I'm ready to resume the conversation when you're ready to speak with me in a respectful tone. And you just keep, don't change your story, don't change your words, right? Like the more you then it feels like it's new information, but really, if you feel like you're getting the punching bag situation and you're not, you need to pause it, you just need to keep reaffirming. You might have to say it 2, 3, 4 times for the person to get it, because they're really emotionally activated and you need to stand your ground. So they're getting higher and higher, right? They're getting more and more upset, and you're really standing your ground with the tone of voice, with the body language. You're not changing the tone. You're not getting louder. You're staying the same. You see how it's like the way I'm talking now. Hey, Joe, this isn't working for me. We need to take a step back. I'm ready to resume this when you're ready to speak with me respectfully. But you don't understand what... Joe, I said what I had to say. We're going to have to resume this when you're ready to speak with me respectfully. Yeah, but you don't even... I'm going to walk away. I want to speak with you about this when you're ready to speak with me respectfully. And so the more, and if you say that three times, at some point you do remove yourself from the situation and say, I'm going to take a step back. Let's continue. Let's continue when we're both ready to speak about this in a respectful way. And then you remove yourself. And the more you can stay out of the emotion, the better off you are, right? So the person that keeps their cool and level-headed approach, not that you're trying to win in a conversation like this, but you're definitely not going to add fuel to the fire. Fuel to the fire is you taking it personally and you getting upset. Revert back to, hey, this person has an unmet need. They're getting emotional. Try to find the compassion. Try to see it as something they're working through that you are assisting with. It's not about you. They're having a challenge. You're assisting them to work through it. Okay, so now you're not the punching bag, but you actually want to get your opinion across. Well, guess what? I've got to be honest with you. If someone is in this situation, as I just said, you're looking to assist them really in coming back down to earth because they're elevated and frustrated. And so you're finding your whole mission as a detective in this conversation is to find the unmet need. Find the unmet need. Now, this is not your time to get your opinion across, other than to uphold boundaries within the discussion, make sure you're being spoken to in a respectful way, all of that. You can uphold your boundaries, which is what we've just talked through. But in all honesty, in my opinion, you are not getting your opinion across to a willing and receptive audience. And so this is not the time to have this conversation. So I almost want to, and for the sake of time as well, it actually works out perfectly because this is going to have to be a different episode, because this is also going to have to be a different conversation for you. There's not, the person that sent me this, it's like, what if, how do I get my opinion across, especially if there's no truth in what the other person is saying? And it's like, yeah, there's truth in their emotions, but the thing is, again, you're being the support figure here. So it's about you uncovering or discovering, I had 2 words in my head. It's about you discovering their unmet need. That is the aim. When someone comes to you in an elevated state, they're complaining or they're frustrated about you, that's not your moment. You can try. But again, the likelihood that you're going to get something is low. Now, if you take a break and you come back and you're both level-headed, that's your time. So you're going to need to ensure that you kind of do a bit of a mental check with yourself and them, like, hey, are they still frustrated? If you see steam coming out of their ears, and they're still reeling from the conversation, frankly, it's not your time to get your points across. You can try, but I would not advise that. What I would say is, at the end of the conversation, you say, you know what? I'd love to talk about this more tomorrow, or insert time, right? And then when you get there, or maybe, so either you continue the discussion at another time, or if that person feels like it's resolved, they're like, yeah, you know what? I feel like you really understand me. Thank you. You see that I was feeling like you didn't care, and so I need more quality time with you to feel like you care, because my love language is quality time. And I do have an episode on love languages, so if you don't know what that is, look at that previous episode. It's Gary Chapman's love languages. So if that person is saying, okay, yes, thank you, you heard me out, I really appreciate it, I feel heard. It's sort of like, they feel heard and validated, and you just did them a massive, not favor, but service, by extending them that compassion and care. It's not really the time. Now, I understand it's like, well, when is my time? This person is always frustrated with me, and I always have to calm them down, and It's like, okay, now you're becoming the critic, right? And so what's your unmet need? Well, you don't feel heard, right? And so that's reasonable and that's fair, and you definitely should, in my opinion, get that across. I'm just saying the time is not when you've taken someone from an elevated state of emotion, walk them into identifying their unmet need, and hopefully at the end of that conversation, you're doing something around action steps. So, okay, I hear that you want that quality time. I hear that you want time together, and that's what's going to help you feel that I care. Will you share some examples of what you'd like? Or maybe, so either that person can give you examples of what they mean, date night once a week, etc., or maybe they are going to co-create with you, and you brainstorm, right, on ideas of what would help. So that, my friends, is how I would approach this. The second half of this person's request, which is essentially, I'm not being heard, right? So how do I make sure I'm heard too? My idea there would be for the next episode, not to leave you on a cliffhanger, but it would be for the next episode, because it's for another conversation. And it's for another conversation because you want to be in the spotlight, and you do deserve to be heard, and you do deserve space to be made. And so I think what it looks like on the very surface, at least, is, again, not when you've gone through this arc, you've gone through this person's frustrated, they come to you, you see it as an opportunity to lend an ear, be a compassionate source of support for them, and you at the end are hopefully finding that unmet need and coming up with, okay, what can we do about this, right? What can we do to help you feel that feeling? Because they have a feeling in mind and they have an unmet need. What's the unmet need? Let's solve it. Right? Let's get that met. Do you just need more hugs? Like, what is it? And I'm not joking or being flippant. Like, sometimes you just need more physical affection, physical touch. Sometimes you need more quality time. Sometimes it's like, you know what? I would really love it if you'd call me, before you go into a 3-hour work meeting or something. Like, it's little things. It's always the little things, but they can create relief. And so you have acknowledged the feeling, you've uncovered the unmet need, and you've come up with steps, and only commit to things that you're willing to do, right? Because you are also in a moment of building trust. And so if you commit to something and you don't really mean it, you're running, that's not a long-term solution. As we all know, you've got to commit to things that you mean to do, in which case you will have solved the unmet need. So you've got to come to, and that's where there's a bit of negotiation, right? Okay, I want you to do this and this. Well, okay, it's not realistic for me to text you every 30 minutes. here's what I could do, or when do you really feel that this bothers you, or it's like, oh well, it's really in the morning, or it's really before bed, or like they'll give you more context. So if you're aiming to support them, they'll give you more context. That being said, again, that action step phase, right, of like, okay, let's find a way, right? So once you've uncovered the unmet need, okay, let's find a way to meet the need. At this point, hopefully they're at a place of being collaborative with you. If they're not, you're not in the action steps phase, because they're just going to be resentful and telling you things that are outrageous or not really collaborating. So the action step phase of how can we meet this need together? I want to be here for you. Or if it's not someone, like your partner, but you just want to help them, it's like, hey, well, how can you meet that need? What are some steps? If you do want to offer something that you can help, do that. But don't go to that phase until that person is not elevated anymore, right? And you'll sense that by their tone of voice. Their body language will be more open. Their facial expressions will be less angry, right? Less scrunching of the brow. You'll sense that they're less upset, and that's when you can go to action items. And then I would recommend that the second part of this question, which is, how do I get my opinion across in a conversation? That's going to be a separate conversation. So I'll leave it there. I think one thing I can say about that before we go is, you ask for that conversation. So not in that moment when you've just gone through the action items and you've helped them, but if you identify through that conversation or through a series of them, hey, you know what? I have a need. And my unmet need is I don't get to be heard. I feel like I don't get my opinions across. That's going to be the perfect opener for our next episode, where you're going to go to that person and say, hey, I'm really struggling with something and I want to chat with you about it. Can we talk about it? And hopefully, again, context, the environment, you want to catch this person when it's a reasonable-ish time to talk if you can. Now, we all have feelings, so that doesn't always happen. We're talking ideal scenario here. But you're going to want to go to that person in another setting and say, hey, you know what? I'm really struggling with this, or I have a need that I want to share with you, or I'm not feeling great about something and I really want to talk with you about it, or talk it through with you. Do you have, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is? And that would be the opener to the second half of this request, which is, how do I get my opinion across in a conversation? You're not doing it in a discussion where that person's coming at you and you feel like you're the punching bag and you have to protect yourself. So it's not in the conversation that's initiated by someone else's emotional response and their unmet need. That's not ideal. Now, okay, if you've done the action steps and you're in a marathon type conversation and you feel that you're both up to it, fair enough. Listen to the next episode and we'll talk through how to get your opinion heard. But in my experience, if someone's really riled up and they've come back down and you've talked through how you're going to make it better and how you're going to approach the situation next time, you just got to kind of realize that conversation was for them. Again, you're going to have yours. You're going to get your conversation. If you think you still have the emotional bandwidth and the time after that's played out from their side and the situation we just walked through, fair enough. Go to the next episode and we can talk about how to get your opinion across. But for now, don't be anybody's punching bag. Again, remember, this is not talking about emotional or physical abuse. If you're experiencing that or in that situation, I highly recommend you seek support right away. You deserve to be in a safe environment. So I want to thank you for your attention today, for listening in. I hope that it was useful. If you feel like you're the punching bag in conversations and you just get trampled over, it's time for some boundaries, all right? And I get that this can be hard. It's definitely something to practice. It also depends who it is. Work your way up. If the person that you're thinking about feels too big of a leap for you, practice setting some boundaries with coworkers or other people that feel low stakes, some friends. Like, practice putting the hand up and drawing the line more and having that teacher voice, that authoritative tone. Practice that so that when you do get in a situation with a loved one or where you feel you usually don't assert your needs, you have some practice under your belt. So, thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please do review, subscribe. You can click the subscribe button pretty much on any viewing platform. I know Apple Podcasts you can review, and share it with a friend, share it with a loved one. Anybody that you can share this with increases the reach of the show, and it makes a world of difference. So I hope to see you on the next one. We'll talk about how to get your opinion across in a conversation. Hope to see you there, and take good care until then. Thanks so much for taking the time to listen to this episode today. It really helps the show when you like, review, subscribe, or donate to support the effort to continue producing amazing episodes just like this one. I look forward to seeing you again in another episode very soon, and take good care until then.